Hi everyone, Brian here. Hey listen, my breakdown video of Taglioni, it ran a little long and I only wanted it to be about 20 minutes, so I deleted a lot of content. Since it had a lot of views, I thought I would make a second video using the content that I deleted. And this is going to be that video. I hope you enjoy it. Today, I'm going to break down my performance of Marie Taglioni in Pas de Quatre, or Grand Pas de Quatre, or Le Grand Pas de Quatre, however you want to say it. Hey, did you know that Pas de Quatre debuted at Her Majesty's Theatre in London, UK on July 12, 1845? And it starred four of the most famous ballerinas of the era: Lucille Grand, Carlotta Grisi, Fanny Sciarrito, and Marie Taglioni. I want to reiterate that I danced for all-male comedy ballet companies, and I was a male comedy ballerina. And my job at the time was to parody ballerinas and make statements on ballets. I dressed as a ballerina for comedy's sake. A ballerina is a female ballet dancer who has reached an advanced level of ballet technique. Comedy is active and incorporates sequences of events, such as falling down, tripping, bumping into other people, something that I was very good at, which is falling downstairs. And humor is more intellectual and therefore more subjective, and could be something such as making a statement on a ballet or on a character or on another dancer. And we had rules that we had to abide by, such as not doing anything that was intentionally mean or not doing anything that would make the audience laugh at us as opposed to laughing with us. Doing anything that was vulgar, putting jokes too close together was something also that was very important because we didn't want to overload the comedy. I danced all four roles in Pas de Quatre. I danced them in order of the variations. So I danced Lucille Grand first, and then Carlotta Grisi, then Fanny Sciarrito, and then last but not least, certainly not least because this is what this video is all about, Marie Taglioni. I was still fairly new to the company when I danced Lucille Grand. I was 28 years old at the time. I was 2 years older than she was when she danced the ballet originally. And even though I was still young for a normal person, for a dancer, I was sort of middle-aged, right? But there were a lot of dancers in the company at the time who were older. So I was one of the younger ones in the company, even though I was 28. And I believe this was the first time I had a solo in the company because I had done all core work before. And so I hadn't really developed a full ballerina persona at the time. It was basically just me at that time. Even though I was 28, I was still a little bit naive, still innocent, still fresh and new to the dance world. So the character was basically me. But I did want to add this sort of reverence towards Taglioni, that I really looked up to her, and I tried to make that come across in my performance. And I was nice to everybody else, but I didn't have different reactions towards everybody else. She was the same age as Carlotta Grisi, but she wasn't as well known. And then a year later, I was switched over to Carlotta Grisi. I don't know why, I just was, and that was fine. I was excited to dance another variation. And so I danced her for about 5 years, so I had more time to develop that character. And I knew that she had danced Giselle, so she had a little bit more experience. She was more well-known than Lucille Grand, so I made her a little bit more elegant and more mature. And I gave her some Giselle qualities, sort of a more ethereal, willy type ghost, ethereal qualities. And then I also danced Fanny Sciarrito, but I only danced her one time, and I went in for someone who was sick or injured. I don't remember. I think they were sick, and I don't remember where it was. It was on tour somewhere. Could have been anywhere. Could have been Europe. Could have been Japan. I don't know where it was. I wish I did. I wish I knew where it was, and I wish I had a recording of that performance, but I don't. But I know I did it, and I just had fun with it, and I didn't really create a character. I just sort of made her having fun being there. When I was approached about dancing Taglioni, I was 40 years old. And then at that time, I was older and there was a lot more younger dancers. So I was dancing with a lot of 20-year-olds, 20, 21, 22, a lot of younger dancers. So I was an older dancer, but I still felt young. And so when it was suggested that I learn Taglioni, I was sort of hesitant only because I didn't feel like I didn't feel old. And a lot of the dancers who had performed Taglioni in the past had played Taglioni like she was decrepit, like she was old. A lot of people drew lines on her face, and some people even gave her a gray wig. And a lot of people sort of danced her as if she had arthritis and she was limping, and they made her old. And so I always saw that character in the grand scheme of male comedy ballet as being old, and I didn't want to perform her old. So in my research of her, I found, oh, well, she was my age. She was 41 when she danced pas de quatre, and I was 40, so I thought, I'll just play her my age, which was young, which I thought was young. So I didn't do any lines on her face. I gave her a black wig. I wore a black wig sometimes, but my ballerina persona most of the time wore a red wig. I started off with a black wig, and then I sort of moved over into a red wig. I thought I looked better in a red wig. The black wig made me look a little harsher, and the red wig sort of brightened me up a bit. So I thought that the red wig worked well for my other characters, but for Taglioni, the harshness, it worked well. So I always wore the black wig as Taglioni. Sometimes there are some pictures of me wearing the red wig, but for the most part, I wore the black wig as Taglioni. I decided that I was going to base my characterization on Alicia Alonso's interpretation. And also, I thought, well, this would be a good time because I like to be broad, I like to be big. I wanted to add a little bit of Gloria Swanson as Norma Desmond, sort of that the lip up, the eyebrow up, and the fingers sort of like this, the wide eyes. So I gave her this sort of, I'm ready for my close-up. All you wonderful people out there, the top. Norma Desmond character. Sort of a Norma Desmond, Alicia Alonso. A combination of the two. That's how I portrayed her for about a year. A decade earlier, I had done a performance at the Arlene Schnitzer Concert Hall in Portland, Oregon, which was sort of my home. I lived in Portland for 3 years, and I went to school there for dance. And I came back, and a nice thing that the director did at the time was that anytime the company performed in a dancer's hometown, it was sort of made a big deal. They got extra roles, and they did more publicity, and so it was sort of like always a coming home for that particular dancer. So the Portland show was sort of like a coming home performance for me. At the end of the show, I did a PSA for DRA, which was Dancers Responding to AIDS, and where we asked people to give money to the organization to help dancers who were suffering from AIDS. And so we did our bows, and I ran to the corner, got a microphone, and said, "Hey, I'm Brian, I'm from Grants Pass." And the audience went crazy. They were clapping and screaming and yay! The audience was a great audience in the first place. Portland was one of the best places I ever performed in as far as audiences goes. But they just went crazy when I said I was from Grants Pass. So I thought, okay, I'm going to use that. I'm going to pretend that whenever I'm on stage, the audience is on their feet, screaming and applauding and saying brava, throwing flowers and just going crazy for Taglioni. And so I was going to react to that, which was in my head, and just reacting to this image in my head of the people applauding for me. And as well as keeping the qualities of the Alicia Alonso and a little bit, I didn't do as much of the Norma Desmond. I sort of dropped that whole thing and kept the Alicia Alonso and kept the coming home. Another thing I want to talk about are my entrances and exits as Taglioni because it really became a big part of my character and my performance. And the interesting thing about it is that it was a real struggle for me to commit to this idea I had about slowly coming out. It doesn't seem like a big deal now to me, but at the time, it was a really big deal because I wasn't sure if it was going to work. And the first time I did it, I was actually nervous about it. I never really got nervous when I was performing. I was usually excited. I had this adrenaline rush because I wanted to do well, but I was never really nervous, quote unquote. But for this, I was really nervous because I didn't know how the audience was going to react. Because usually dancers want to get on the stage fairly quickly, so there's not a lull in the performance. And when you leave the stage, when you exit the stage, you want to be off the stage before the audience stops applauding. You never want to be still on stage when the audience stops applauding. That's just sort of a rule. So the idea I have, I thought, okay, this whole idea of visualizing the audience on their feet and applauding for me and reveling in that experience, that meant that I really wanted to absorb the moment. I wanted to take in the moment as the character and not let that moment go because it meant so much to my character that I didn't want to let that moment go. I took it very seriously, and it's something that I debated over whether or not I should do. I really struggled over this, and it was a decision I didn't take lightly. And that's another thing, is that I took my job as a male ballerina very serious. It wasn't that I was arrogant about being a dancer, it was that I wanted to do my best, and that every decision I made had to be made for a reason, and I wanted to do my best. I wanted to look my best, I wanted to perform my best, I wanted to dance my best, and I wanted my character to be developed in the best way that I could. This was something that I really struggled over. My ballerina persona was that I was always the one that was high energy. I had the big smile, and I was really sort of the comedy relief of the company, so to speak. Even though it was a comedy ballet company, I seemed to get the biggest laughs from the audience. A lot of the entrances I did were very fast and high energy. I'd run on quickly, and I'd place, and then I'd do my variation, because a lot of the times I was the high energy variation. So this was something completely different for me. Because we did so many performances during the year, the majority of the performances were in Japan, I sort of used that time to explore and try new things, because if something didn't work one day, then I would try something else. And I could keep trying until I found something that worked. I was involving the audience in my performance when I walked out, because I was looking out to them and reacting to them. Even though they weren't really doing anything, they were watching me, they reacted to me involving them. And they enjoyed it. And it actually worked, and so I kept doing it. And I could just turn my head or tilt my head and get a reaction. Or my reaction would cause the reaction. They could react to me reacting to them. It became one of my favorite things to do, just to walk out. And then I would do the same thing when I would exit. I would take my time exiting. And again, the applause in my head would be bigger than it was when I was entering. And it really elevated my character and my performance and took it to a whole new level, which made it even more fun for me to perform. There was a time I was performing at the Symphony Space in New York on the Upper West Side, and I had another injury because I was injured quite a bit when I was dancing. That's one thing I do not miss about dancing, is being injured. I was able to do the beginning of the ballet, the beginning of pas de quatre, and the coda, but I wasn't really able to do the variation because I had a lot of hopping on point, hopping on my foot, and I couldn't really hop on my foot because I injured my foot again. Even though there were jumps and there were runs, which I couldn't do, I normally didn't do them anyway. I would just sort of do the motion of jumping. I didn't leave the floor. I just would do the upper body as if I were jumping, while everybody else around me was doing the jumps. And it wasn't because I couldn't do them, I just felt like the character couldn't be bothered to do them. And when I ran, I would just, instead of running, walk quickly or briskly, but slowly. And that was a part of the character, so I could continue doing that even though I was injured. So I really wanted to dance. I wasn't one of those people that's like, oh, I'm injured, I can't dance. No, I wanted to dance even if I was injured. I still wanted to go out there any way I could. So what I decided was, okay, I'm going to do the opening and the coda, but I'm also going to do my entrance for my solo. All I did was enter slowly, of course, do my reacting to the audience, place on my mark, and then slowly turn and walk off. And it was a fun thing, and the audience enjoyed it. And I actually did it again when I was directing. We were doing a gala, and we had a casting board for the gala, so the audience knew who was going to be performing what. I didn't put that I was going to be coming out. It was a surprise. And so I just came out. I had retired. I wasn't dancing anymore, so I was out of shape. And putting the shoes on hurt because I hadn't had point shoes on for about 2 years. Those of you who know how much point shoes hurt, it hurt. And all I was doing was walking in the point shoes, and it still hurt. And it got a big reaction. And I just came out, like I did before, just placed, and then walked off. That was the last time I had ever performed Taglioni. So it was a nice little send-off for her. Eventually, Taglioni became something more to me. I had been known at the beginning of my career as Odette, and then I became known towards the end of my career as Taglioni. So I always look at Odette and Taglioni as very important parts of my career because they're the bookends of my career. Hey, I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to watch my video. If you like this video, please consider frapping that like button. Also consider bombing that subscribe button. Why not share the video? Thank you very much. See you again. Bye-bye.